Okay, so this one is about the disruptive nature of intangible assets, in particular things like smart contracts, NFTs, tokens, um, but also, the unknown or the relatively unknown intangible asset, which is a common law um, will and holding entitlements. Now, to create a will, you don't necessarily have to stipulate that it's passed on at death. You can create a will any time, and that will can contain entitlements, privileges, obligations, and they can be enacted while you're still alive. Now, the interesting thing about this is that it can be enacted under common law, and it can be enacted under statute law. And I'll get into that in a second. But it's really important to understand the disruptive nature of intangible assets. And so, what I'm going to do is go into that quite deeply, but also use my own project, Powerhouse, as an example of how we're leveraging the disruptive nature of intangible assets, intangible digital assets, and what we're able to achieve because of it. And it's most people scratch their heads because it's hard to believe that the formal economy is this exposed, as well as the legal system. And I'll go into that as well. So, from my personal experience, working on a disruptive project in this space, if you're someone that's working on a project in this space as well, then you may have encountered this, or you may encounter it at some point. And that is the excitement of everyone in the beginning about a disruptive technology, and then the reality of the truth of how disruptive it is, instilling fear and anxiety, and people wanting to cling on to what is known rather than leap off the cliff into the unknown. And in New Zealand in particular, we're not quite there in terms of our the innovation value chain. The legal advisement aspect of that is not as mature as other countries. As a founder in this space, it's been very difficult to find legal support. So I'm going to go into the kernel of the disruptive nature of this technology, and I'll use my project as an example, Powerhouse. So, in terms of disruption meaning, a radical change to the current reality, to the status quo, that potentially renders the status quo obsolete. And so I want to share with you. I'll give you a use case as an example. So think of an asset. Most of us know what an asset is. It's a means of storing value. It's a store of value. So if you possess something that has inherent value, then it's storing that value until you utilize it for a mechanism of exchange. You exchange it with someone who sees that value and ideally has the potential to realize that value in some way. So let's look at with a bank at the moment, quite a common thing for it, let's say you're a multi-billionaire or just a normal billionaire. If you're not someone that's going to, let's say you buy an asset like a really expensive home, you're not going to borrow money to purchase that home. You're going to pay cash for that home outright. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use that house as collateral, and then you're going to use that to lend, to borrow money. using the house as collateral, and then you're going to invest the money you've borrowed, because there's tax advantages to that. In that scenario, you own the physical asset of the home, of the house, and you're entitled to monetize that asset whilst it's being utilized as leverage to borrow money that you can then invest in other assets. Now, what this does is it actually increases the money supply, and it's pretty common. It's pretty well known these days that this is how it works. That's the money that you borrow from the bank. It's not doesn't come out of their coffers. It's created. It's brand new money, and it increases the money supply by the value of that home. Now, there are positives and negatives to this. I don't want to go into that now, but what it does do is it means that the money, the home, the asset value of it, it's not coagulating, being held up in the home itself. It's liberating the potential to appreciate other assets, which is great. And from the perspective of the billionaire, there's a home that can then be monetized, by certain means. You can rent it out, you can put it on Airbnb, whatever it may be. So you get the utility of the home, and you get to borrow a whole bunch of money and invest it in other wealth-generating assets, and that can then service that debt. And you can meet an unmet need in the marketplace, which is great. Now, obviously, there's an impact of this on the money supply. Is fiat currency is becoming less scarce because the money supply is increasing. So there's more money moving around in the money supply, and so prices go up. So it's inflationary. So in this, the impact of inflation always hits people that aren't billionaires, who aren't investing in assets, who can't pay cash for a multi-million-dollar home. So nonetheless, this is how it works. So the dependencies you have on this framework, you have a bank, that's the main dependency. You have a central bank, and you have a legal framework. It happens within the law of statute, and trust is you got a whole bunch of store of value, a whole bunch of money flowing around the system, and so there has to be trust imbued in that system. So if you go step by step through that system of that process, then there's multiple nodes of trust, but most of them are dependent upon the trust of the individuals involved on the institution of the bank and the government, the framework that's wrapped around that, etc. Nonetheless, trust is what enables that to happen. So in that scenario, in that context, understanding that trust is the mechanism that gives people enough trust to be able to freely distribute assets and money in a store of value to other people. There are other ways you can imbue trust into their system. Now, obviously, blockchain is an evolution of a way to imbue trust into a system without having a dependency on a centralized mechanism like a bank or like a centralized servers, and whether it's a system or a bank or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. You're wanting to imbue trust into a system, and so blockchain is ideal for that. But here's another scenario. So Powerhouse is the project that I'm involved with, and it's designed to be a marketplace that bridges the worlds of Web3 and Web 2, traditional, the formal economy and the informal economy. And so what you have is a trust. You have a trust, which is the fulcrum of where the exchange happens. And so here's a scenario. Same situation. Let's say this billionaire owns the home, and they want to transact within the Powerhouse marketplace. So they come to the trust. So this trust is a charitable trust. It's called the Empower Trust. It's a charitable trust, and it is its constitution obligates it to preserve the assets that it is the custodian of. It's to protect and preserve the assets. That's it. And so the owner of the house comes along and says, I'm going to make a donation of this home into your stewardship. And it's an obligation-free donation. However, contained within the constitution of the trust, of the charitable trust, is a pledge. Now, a pledge is a non-legally binding expression of intent. And so it is our intention to pledge a token of appreciation for all donations received to the approximate equivalent value of the donation as an expression of our appreciation. So you have an obligation-free donation happening, an asset going into the stewardship of a charitable trust. And then you have a pledge for the minting of a token. It's actually not a token. What it is it's a constitution in common law that holds entitlements to privileges, and that privilege is an NFT created on the Powerhouse marketplace to the value of the asset as a token of appreciation. So it's a gratuity. So here you have a mechanism similar to the banking system, where the billionaire purchases a house for cash, uses the asset as leverage to create, to borrow money that can then be invested. So you've got the owner of that house, he's donated it to the charitable trust, and he's now received as a token of appreciation for the kind donation of the house an NFT, which is just a smart contract. It's actually not a currency at all. It's a common law asset in the form of a digital contract that contains entitlements to privileges. And when they join the Powerhouse marketplace, they log in and they go into their digital wallet, and let's say their house is worth $1 million New Zealand dollars. We benchmark it against the New Zealand dollar. There's $1 million Power Coin, and it's not even an NFT. It's not a smart contract. It's it's just a virtual. It is a token, but it's not officially tokenized because it's happened under common law. So, all of a sudden, you have a means of exchange within a marketplace, the Powerhouse marketplace. And so everything available on the Powerhouse marketplace can be traded and exchanged for PowerCoin. So what happens now is, within the constitution of the charitable trust, it's the steward of that asset, of the house now, and it then grants the privilege of monetizing the asset to the community of the marketplace. So one of the obligations of this charitable trust is to enact the will of the donor. And so the will of the donor is for the dormant potential of the asset to be appreciated in perpetuity. So, the charitable trust, it's Switzerland, it's neutral. It's like, okay, that's cool. So they enact that will, and then that will is turned into an asset on the marketplace. And so on the marketplace, you can see there's a house and it's available to be monetized. Now, there's a single source of truth for this home. So in order to realize the dormant potential of that asset, then it needs to be rented out. People can rent it for a day, for a week, for a month, whatever it may be. And so that information is all managed centrally. So there's a central single source of truth that is immutable. But the marketplace itself is mutable. It has perpetually mutable form. And the marketplace itself is just it's an avatar. So the marketplaces are avatars, they're skins. So here you have a scenario. Here's an asset floated to the community that can be monetized. The booking system and everything like that is fixed. And this is the pricing, etc. So all that stuff is immutable. The value is established up front. But then the entire community are empowered to create their own bespoke marketplace and brand to actualize the potential of that house, the dormant potential, to meet a currently unmet need. So all of a sudden you can have a marketplace pop up that consolidates all of the mansions in this area, and it's called whatever it's called. And they do their own advertising, they do their own marketing, and they're looking for customers who are looking for homes in a specific area. And when you go to their marketplace, that asset is populated on their shopfront, along with everything else within that category. But here's the thing, is you could have thousands of marketplaces all advertising and featuring that same home. Some could be advertising and marketing a staycation home. Some could be advertising, an Airbnb kind of thing. Some could be advertising it as a wedding, a place as a wedding venue for a wedding reception or whatever. And it could be being utilized in a myriad different ways. And it really doesn't matter, because the accessibility of it is all managed centrally. Someone books it, then it automatically updates. The pricing is all fixed. And so you're turning the entire community you're establishing all of these extraordinarily refined marketplaces and niches who are all creating their own unique message and marketing to their own unique tribe based on their specific values. So, if you look at Airbnb as an example, Airbnb is a classic example of the issue with centralized marketplaces, where they become so fragmented because there's so much stock, and you can't consolidate it because it's centralized. Now all of a sudden you have marketplaces that are popping up that could be so focused that they're only focusing on, you have a new brand that pops up and it's only focusing on 15 houses within one city. And there's a unique characteristic to this home. So, it could be a brand called Poolside Mansions, and it only features all the homes that are mansions that have swimming pools in San Francisco. You see, and so what we're doing is we're decentralizing we're consolidating the fragmentation of the powerhouse marketplace, because that's what's unique about the powerhouse marketplace. Is it is a centralized marketplace. So it allows, and encourages perpetual fragmentation of that marketplace, just continually populating it with new assets that can then be consolidated in perpetuity. And so it's multi-dimensional. You've got one home that could be being marketed for thousands of different brands. And that's how you create an autonomous system. Is you allow it to be fragmented, and you disentangle it into its base nature, and then you allow its value to be actualized in a myriad different ways from every perspective of the market, not just a single one. And that's the issue with centralized marketplaces. Is Amazon. You go to Amazon and it's just speaking to the entire market. Well, how can you create a marketing message to the entire marketplace when everyone has a unique perspective? And this enables that perspective to be distilled and spoken to specifically, so that the need that is there within the marketplace is uncovered, identified, and met. So obviously that's potent in and of itself, but the purpose of this podcast is to speak about the disruptive nature of this. What we've done is we've, in a way that cannot be regulated, is we've created a common law asset that has been issued by the spokesperson of the legal person who owns the asset. It's been put into the stewardship of a trust. And it's been traditionally with a bank, where where the house is used as collateral to draw down a loan to borrow money, that's been replaced with obligation-free donations and gratuities. So there's no exchange. There's just obligation-free donation, and then a will that goes with that the charitable trust is obligated to fulfill because of the way that it's constituted. Because it's a charitable trust, people trust it. Because people can see what the Constitution is, they can see they're legally bound to enact the will. And there you have it. So this is obviously incredibly potent. It cannot be, legislation can't stop it, because actually I'll explain how that works. The reason this is impervious to legislation and being told that this asset is it is a financial instrument, which is, most people assume, oh no, that's a financial instrument. It'll be regarded as a financial instrument. But here's the thing: the principal asset in this entire ecosystem is a common law constitution containing the will of the spokesperson. And so really hone in on this, because this is the point that I think no one really understands yet, is that you as a human being, in law, you're two things. You're a natural person and you're a legal person. As a legal person, that's the name written on your birth certificate, and your body, that pertains to your physical body only as a physical asset. And your birth certificate is like a bond. Bonds the physical asset of your body to the government body. And that's what it is. The government body is empowered to actualize the potential of that physical body. But it cannot impinge upon your will. You see, your will is your voice. And when you consciously and deliberately disentangle your voice from the physical body, then you can express your will separate to the body. Very, very important to understand this. And so when you disentangle your voice from your physical body, you can create an asset out of your will under common law. And you declare that by saying that you are the spokesperson. I am the one known as David of the Ding family, spokesperson on behalf of David Ding, legal person. You separate the voice, which contains the will, out from the body, which contains the dormant potential of the dormant genetic potential of the body. So when you separate those two things out, and just to help you understand how this works, if I break a law, that's a decision I made using my will. If the police come to arrest me, they are legally entitled to take my body and detain my physical body, but they cannot impinge upon my rights. I have the right to remain silent, and so that's the extent of their power. They cannot force me to do something against my will. And so, they can lock me up, throw me in jail, and they can yell at me. They can make demands for me to hop on one foot, for example. I demand that you hop on one foot, but they cannot force me to hop on one foot, and I can refuse. This is unalienable. It's an immutable fact that the commander of the vehicle, the commander of the vessel of the body, is the voice, and the voice is sovereign, and the body is the asset, but can only be commanded by the commander. And this is why in law, in statute law, if you have a contract with someone that's between the body and, let's say, a company, it's between the legal person and between a company. If something is owed, for example, money is owed, it can only be demanded. It can't be commanded. And the reason it can only be demanded is because a demand is a firm request. That's literally what a demand means. Is it still requires the commander to accept. It still requires the permission of the commander. And what will really blow your mind is that it's the same in a courtroom as well, and I'll talk to that in a second. So now you have a scenario where if you express your will as the spokesperson on behalf of the legal person, then you're splitting the two out. You can create an asset that only pertains to the voice or the will, and you can create another asset that pertains to the physical asset of the human body. And so on paper, what you're wanting to do is express your will, and then as a human being, and then your body enacts that will. If I want a cup of tea, I first of all have to acknowledge the desire for a cup of tea. Then my body enacts that will, and I experience the fulfillment of that will is the experience of drinking the cup of tea. And so it's just splitting these things out. So you have a principal asset, it's in common law, it's immutable, can't be touched by a government, any form of government agency. Nothing that is bonded to statute has power over that will. And here's the beautiful thing about a principal and tangible asset under common law is, and what I call them, the SERPO organization that I've developed, that is a hybrid of Actually, I'm not going to go into that just yet. But the beauty of a common law will is that it can be expressed by a singular voice. So me as David of the Ding family and the spokesperson on behalf of David Ding, the legal person, or it can be a unified voice. So you can create a principal asset as the unified voice of 1 million people, and it can be that will can be activated as an intangible asset under common law by the spokesperson as the unified voice of a massive group of people. So it works for a single human being, and it works for an endless amount of human beings as a unified singular voice in one single immutable intangible asset. And so once you have that intangible asset, the will, it's created via what's called an unincorporated group. It's the same mechanism that they use in the political system in New Zealand. So the National Party, for example, the actual party is called an unincorporated group. But in our legal system, they inadvertently entangle the voice in with the statutory legal person. So they are entangled in our political system right now, as is our judicial system. And so that's what I want to speak to next. So in New Zealand, if you've got a dispute and it goes to the court, then you begin at the district court if that dispute's at a certain level. But when you go into that courtroom, the district court is set up to deal with statutory issues, but the common law issues go to that district court as well. There's nowhere else you can take them, unless there is another track, but I'm not going to go into that right now. And so if you want to disentangle yourself from the legal person, the statutory person, you have to declare that when you go into the courtroom. And so you have to be careful not to inadvertently bond yourself to statute, because the judge, they're dealing with you as a legal person, not as a common law natural person. And so the reality is, in that courtroom, if you declare that you are the spokesperson on behalf of your physical body, that the jurisdiction of that court, it actually stands under the command of your voice. And so it has no authority to impinge upon your will. And in fact, if it does choose to try and impinge upon your will, it's a very serious thing for the agents, whether it's the judge or the lawyers or whoever involved. It's a very serious thing that they attempt to utilize the law of statute to impinge upon your free will as a sovereign human being, due to a duty of care that's required under common law to all human beings. That would be a very serious thing if you understand how this works. So you have to be empowered. You have to understand how the law works, and you have to be knowledgeable enough to be able to utilize your voice to disentangle yourself from these things. But very important to understand, statute stands underneath the command of the voice or the will of the people. So what does this mean? Well, there's a massive, major vulnerability in the legal system. There's a massive issue pertaining to a duty of care that's required for companies and legal persons when they're contracting with other human beings. This duty of care is being neglected and even exploited in many cases, which is exposing the natural human being to breaches of a duty of care under common law, which is a very serious thing. And so these vulnerabilities have to be hardened. I've been working on this for over a decade now to identify and reveal these vulnerabilities, and I've had to exploit them in certain cases for people to believe that they actually exist. But they do, and when they find out, it can be pretty daunting. So hopefully you can begin to see the nature of the potential disruption of community-led, voice-led DAOs who are activating their will as a group that cannot be touched by the judicial system. And now just allow that to sink in for a second. And then they're converting that into an intangible asset, and that asset contains entitlements, and it can then empower agencies to enact that will. So once an agency enacts that will, that then falls into statute and can be legislated and regulated. However, the will of that group of people or the single person can reconstitute the principal asset to avert the issues in legislation. You see? So, and ultimately even revoke the agency for enacting that will from the incorporated trust, and then reissue it to another, to a different trust or to a different agency. And so it doesn't matter if the enactment of that will is stopped and regulated against, it can just be revoked and then reissued to a completely new agent. And the inner workings of the Powerhouse platform as a marketplace, all the assets are the same way. So you've got a statutory asset, which is the smart contract, and that can be bonded to legal persons and statutory entities, and then that can be legislated against or regulated against. But then you can just even those assets have a principal asset, which is contained within the will. And so again, it can be tweaked, reconstituted, dissolved, and recreated to continually and perpetually avert the impingement of statutory regulation upon the will. Now, if I know this is a lot to take in, obviously, but we have to understand this mechanism of law in order to understand the disruptive nature of what's going on with community-led DAOs and autonomous organizations. And so just to zoom out for a second and look at the technology, in 2009, Bitcoin was floated as a public sovereign, immutable, blockchain empowered by the community. And it's immutable. It perpetually evolves and expands and continues on and on and on, and will do in perpetuity. Can't be stopped. However, and so look at that technology in 2009, and look at where we are now, and the technology's come, it's a lot further down the track. Now, so that technology, the essence of it is what people are using to build autonomous organizations, and now infusing this mechanism of the structure for an autonomous organization. You can float assets onto a marketplace that can never be stopped and will continue to evolve and expand in perpetuity. And unless the government bodies of countries and nations recognize this really, really quickly and begin to collaborate with the private sector in order to can not necessarily contain the disruption, but imbue grace into it. The nature of that disruption, it's so radical. It is so radical, and the technology is getting so good right now, the software side of it, that I would say within the next 2 to 3 years, the ability for any human being to create an organization like this would literally be as simple as filling in a form on a website, clicking a mouse button, writing down your will, whatever it may be, clicking submit, and you've got an autonomous organization on a marketplace that will perpetually evolve and expand, that the potential of will be actualized by the community, and it will just go like wildfire. You can't stop it. And so to just bring this back to the example of the billionaire plonking their home into the stewardship of the trust, it's the same thing. That you could have 100% occupancy of that home all year round, and it's being occupied by a community on a marketplace who are all driving the marketing themselves, and it's occupied every day of the year. And the only thing that's activated the potential of that asset to actualize its commercial potential, to meet the unmet need, is the original common law will. It's plonked on the marketplace. You click submit. As soon as it's into the custodianship of that ecosystem, it's gone. And it just gets filled. And it's because the entire ecosystem wins. Everyone receives a share of the revenue. Everyone receives whether you call it a royalty or commission, it doesn't matter. And it's the ultimate in cooperative collaboration. And one of the challenges for me has been explaining this to my investors and my team. And I've always talked about the dangers of how quickly it will scale, and that we have to contain it and be careful. And it's just so hard for them to wrap their head around the nature of how this can scale, because it doesn't scale in a linear fashion. It scales in a non-linear fashion, where you could potentially have 1,000 different brands and businesses all marketing the same home in an entirely unique and different way. So each individual fragment, let's say every avatar marketplace that's representing that asset, is seeking to actualize its potential. You've got an army of people that look at that home and think to themselves, oh, that would do really well. They get an idea for a marketplace, and they can all see a need somewhere that can be met by that home. Or the unmet need in the entire market from that single asset is being met. And it's that simple. Well, I say it's that simple. Once the system's working properly and the mechanisms in place, it is that simple. Plonk an asset into the stewardship of the trust. They enact the will. They plonk that will on the marketplace containing the obligations, privileges, whatever it may be. And the rest is history. And these awesome collaborative teams form. And so I'm not going to go into the mechanisms for the creating of the entitlements, privileges, obligations, all that kind of stuff, because that's kind of in depth. Because what you have to do is you have to, when you're expressing your will and the principal asset, you have to have considered the beginning and the ending. You have to look at, okay, what does this organization need? It needs a marketing person. It needs a an analyst, whatever it may need, and you create separate entitlements for custodians of the next layer down of assets, who are then empowered as agents, who receive a share of the royalties, a share of each sale. And so, it's like a stem cell. You enable that first layer of the virtual team, and then they actualize the potential. Okay, so I'll leave it there. I'm probably going to make another one to go along with this and go a bit deeper into what can be done with a common law intangible asset as a principal asset. And so that's it for now for the disruptive nature of digital assets, intangible digital assets. You know what I mean. Okay, cheers for now.